The IDF is preparing to take control of Gaza City while ensuring humanitarian assistance flows to civilians outside combat zones and away from the reach of Hamas. This is not conquest. Israel has no plans or desire to permanently occupy Gaza. This is liberation from a brutal terror regime. As our briefer stated earlier, I wish to reiterate the principles, the 5 clear principles that the Israeli Security Cabinet adopted for concluding the war.
We presented plans and proposals and cooperated with every effort to facilitate an agreement to end the war on our people, while reiterating clearly that the absence of such an agreement in no way allows Israel to pursue its war of atrocities against the Palestinian people, including these plans of trying to expel 1 million people from Gaza City and to have a number of divisions of the Israeli army to control all corners of the Gaza Strip. Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this meeting based on a request supported by nearly every member of the Security Council to address the grave situation in Gaza and further shocking developments. Allow me also to thank ASG Yancha for his report and also Mr. Raja Singham for his briefing. Mr. President, Israel is killing Palestine in Gaza. That is its objective. And there, over 2 million victims are enduring unbearable agony that the human mind can barely comprehend. We are not allowed to fail them any longer. We do not have the luxury to feel guilt or shame. We owe them to act now to stop this genocide. Mr. President, there is something undeniable. Israel does not care about what we say, what you say. It is obvious. The only thing that matters now is what we do. What will force Israel to change course is our ability to transform justified condemnation into just actions. And history will judge us all. We appreciate the description of almost all of you of the deepness of the pain and the tragedy that our people is enduring. While this is okay, it is not sufficient. You have to act. You have to do something about it. You have to stop it. Otherwise, this analysis and description does not mean anything if you do not do something to stop it. And you have tools available to you to do so. Mr. President, there is an international plan adopted by the International High-Level Conference in Palestine, co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France, that starts with ending the use of starvation as a weapon of war and ending the war on Gaza through a ceasefire, the release of the hostages and prisoners, a massive surge of humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people in coordination and leadership, in coordination with and leadership of the United Nations, and in line with humanitarian principles and the full withdrawal of Israel from Gaza. The plan further foresees the Palestinian National Authority resuming its sole governmental and security duties in the Gaza Strip with regional and international support, and Hamas handing over its weapons to the Palestinian National Authority in the context of an end to the war and in line with the objective of an independent Palestinian state. It sets forth an irreversible pathway to an independent and sovereign Palestinian state leading to shared peace and security and regional integration. Many of you referred to the results of that historic international conference about 2 weeks ago here in the General Assembly. If Israel's concerns was actually the end of Hamas rule or Hamas disarming, if its concern was actually security, it would have rallied this plan and should have been happy to see this plan adopted by almost the entire international community. Israel is seeking to cement its full military control over the Gaza Strip and is prolonging this war not to end Hamas rule or to disarm it, but to prevent independent Palestinian statehood. That is the truth. The Israeli government has said that clearly over and over again. Somebody was referring to the statement of Prime Minister Netanyahu. He doesn't want to see a Palestinian governing body overlooking the affairs over Gaza, but somebody else, not Palestinians. He said it. It's not a secret. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. Israel proved long ago it was not concerned by the fate of the hostages. Look at the tens of thousands demonstrating in Tel Aviv and other cities, demanding immediate ceasefire and seriously concerned if this insanity to take place against our people in the Gaza Strip, then this is the execution or the death of the hostages, because that is the position of the families and the tens of thousands who are demonstrating in Tel Aviv. This latest decision is some more blatant demonstration of that. The Israeli government dehumanized and demonized Palestinians to such an extent that its genocide against them through mass killing and starvation, including of children, is not opposed in Israel by some, is only opposed in Israel by some brave voices. Israel proved long ago that its goal is the destruction of the Palestinian people through forced transfer and massacres to facilitate its annexation of our land. If some people believe what Prime Minister Netanyahu said yesterday and today, that there is a huge global lie, that there is no starvation in Gaza, and the two gentlemen from the leadership of the UN is also participating in spreading lies, then why don't you, the Security Council, go to the Security Council, take with you 100 journalists from your countries and other countries to verify exactly what is happening in Gaza. If he's so sure of this global conspiracy about the lie, let him prove it, invite you, allow you to go to the Gaza Strip and see exactly what is happening there. Take journalists with you so that you can verify exactly what is happening in Gaza. Because I think Mr. Netanyahu, in spite of all of the effort that he is putting with his government, he doesn't have credibility. He did not convince almost all of you and tens of countries outside this chamber from his narrative, and the narrative of his government, and the narrative of his foreign minister who came trying to manipulate a humanitarian story of a captive and the pain of that caused to that family, and he failed in trying to convince you to forget about the pain of the Palestinian people. Such illegal and immoral plans cannot be met with only outrage. That would not be sufficient. They require the mobilization of all the tools available to stop them, and we really appreciate the massive reaction from almost all countries in all corners of the globe, whether Arab and Muslim countries, or European countries, or countries that are sitting around this table, in condemning, as 5 of them stood outside this chamber in a brave way and principled way, not to please anyone, not to reward anyone, but to act on the basis of principles and conviction in condemning this plan by the Israeli government and demanding that they stop this plan, not to allow it to be implemented and to reconsider. Israel proved long ago it does not care about the Charter, international law, or the resolutions of this Council if not accompanied by consequences. These facts have led many to rightly wonder, how on earth is Israel still allowed to sit around this table and in these United Nations? If it was another country, you would have been imposing sanctions a long time ago. Mr. President, countries around the world are adopting more and more measures to end any form of complicity and to advance accountability, and we appreciate these efforts. Country like Germany to decide not to send weapons to Israel to kill our people in Gaza, just only to use one example. All states should undertake such steps immediately. Of course, it would be wonderful if you implement your resolutions, and would be excessively wonderful if you adopt additional resolutions with measures. But if these are not possible, act in your national capacity. You have tools available to you, in addition to the tools available to the Security Council, but you have tools available to you in your national capacity. Many of you are using them. I urge others to use them, and to ask others to do many other things, including the recognition of the State of Palestine. All states should undertake such steps immediately, but in the face of such contempt and of 2 million lives being destroyed, of people, children killed, maimed, displaced, starved, humiliated, mutilated, buried alive, burnt alive, abducted, tortured, orphaned, bereaved, shattered, torn apart, the measures taken do not match the level of the crimes committed so as to truly deter them. Mr. President, 2 million people continue to endure pain and agony that no human or nation should ever be forced to. They matter. Every single one of them matters, and no one matters more than them. The position of Palestine is unequivocal. We reject all harm to civilians, and our civilians are not less civilians. Their lives are not less worthy. We have never justified and always rejected harming Israeli civilians, killing them or taking them hostage. But we reject any attempt to justify the massacres committed by Israel against Palestinian civilians, or its abduction of thousands of Palestinians, or its starvation policy, or its displacement policy, or its annexation policy. There is no justification whatsoever for such brutality, such impunity. We have called for a ceasefire over and over again, and we were clear that Hamas must work with the mediators to remove any obstacle to excuse that would prolong this war. We appreciate the efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States in this regard. We presented plans and proposals and cooperated with every effort to facilitate an agreement to end the war on our people, while reiterating clearly that the absence of such an agreement in no way allows Israel to pursue its war of atrocities against the Palestinian people, including these plans of trying to expel 1 million people from the Gaza city and to have a number of divisions of the Israeli army to control all corners of the Gaza Strip. Neither a ceasefire agreement was reached, nor the massacres stopped. The devastation of our people, the annihilation of life in Gaza continues as we speak. Therefore, given Netanyahu's insistence to pursue this genocide, to destroy our people through death and displacement, to annex our land, to destroy Palestine, and with it any chance for peace, this Council must act under Chapter 7 to deprive Israel of the means to pursue this war of atrocities. And I appreciate that a number of you refer to that explicitly, and others refer to it by implication. To hold it accountable for its crimes and to send an immediate international protection force to save the Palestinian people from certain death. There is no doubt that it is Israel's impunity that led to Israelis' insanity. And as the world said clearly that nothing that Israel did before the 7th of October could justify harming Israeli civilians on the 7th of October, nothing that Hamas did on the 7th of October can justify harming Palestinian civilians since. As long as Israel is above the law, it will act as an outlaw state. Mr. President, as they have for over 20 years since the Arab Peace Initiative, the region and Palestine are making the choice of peace. I said it loudly and clearly last few days ago in my statement that Ambassador Samuel referred to. In spite of the pain, in spite of the hardship, in spite of the insanity, in spite of people are not maybe thinking logically, we're not losing our minds or allowing our heart to dictate our decisions. We extend our hand in the direction of peace. We accept the declaration that was adopted by the majority of nations during that historic conference on the two-state solution. And we urge those who have not joined to send their letters to the two co-chairs, Saudi Arabia and France, declaring their commitment and abiding by the declaration of the 19 leaders of this conference, the two co-chairs and the 17 co-chairs of the round tables. Peace is much better for everyone than war. We don't need no more wars. We need to stop the killing, the occupation, devastation, hostages, prisoners. We need to respond to the call of millions of people in all corners of the globe, in all capitals, who are saying, peace now, ceasefire now, release of hostages and prisoners now, stop the starvation, send food and medicine and water up to scale to the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, allow for the reconstruction of Gaza, allow for the implementation of the two-state solution by beginning with ending this illegal occupation, the independence of the State of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, and therefore to have the two-state solution as a reality on the ground. This option is much better than the option of what Netanyahu and his government are planning to do against our people in the Gaza Strip, as if what's happening to them is not enough. They want to add more devastation, more agony, more pain. They want to erase them from the face of earth. And we will not allow them to do that, and you should not allow them to do that. We are willing to work with the US administration, Saudi Arabia, and France, and the members of this council and other regional and international partners to bring this war on our people to an end now. To end the bloodshed and the suffering now and once and for all. To achieve freedom and shared peace, security and prosperity. We have a duty to act and cannot waver. Your actions today will determine the fate of millions of people tomorrow, at least those who would have survived by then, and the fate of our region for generations to come. And I thank you very much, Mr. President.
Agradezco.
I thank the delegation of the Observer State of Palestine for their statement. I now give the floor to the delegation of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President, and to our briefers here today. Despite some extraordinary and brazen language and statements we heard here, I will, however, attempt to address the supposed reason for the convening of this meeting. On Thursday night, Israel's Security Cabinet approved the Prime Minister's proposal to defeat the Iran-backed Hamas terrorist organization. This is the same organization responsible for the October 7th attack, currently holding 50 hostages under unimaginable conditions, and remaining the sole source of suffering for the population in Gaza. The IDF is preparing to take control of Gaza City while ensuring humanitarian assistance flows to civilians outside combat zones and away from the reach of Hamas. This is not conquest. Israel has no plans or desire to permanently occupy Gaza. This is liberation from a brutal terror regime. As our briefer stated earlier, I wish to reiterate the principles, the 5 clear principles that the Israeli Security Cabinet adopted for concluding the war. 1, the disarming of Hamas. 2, the return of all our hostages, both living and deceased. 3, the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. 4, Israeli security control in the Gaza Strip. 5, the establishment of a non-Israeli peaceful civil administration governed neither by Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. This is the only way to ensure a better future for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it clear. Israel's goal is not to take over Gaza, but to free Gaza from Hamas and enable a peaceful government to rise in its place. This is the path to stability. This is the path to peace. Hamas's repeated refusal to agree to ceasefire arrangements, together with the horrific images of Eviatar David and Rom Braslavsky, exposing yet another aspect of the organization's monstrosity, make it clear that Hamas will not relinquish its control over Gaza through peaceful means. Nonetheless, despite a broad international consensus that Hamas cannot remain in power, and despite clear evidence of its refusal to give up control, parts of the international community continue to oppose Israel's efforts to act against Hamas. This position is both contradictory and difficult to reconcile with the stated goal of ending Hamas's rule. Some who criticize Israel make sure to call for the unconditional release of the hostages merely to clear their conscience. But how can one ignore the fact that Hamas is exploiting the hostages and the Gazan population to maintain its position, benefiting from attempts to pressure Israel and from the willingness of some countries to recognize a Palestinian state? As Secretary of State Rubio said, talks with Hamas fell apart on the day President Macron made the unilateral decision that he's going to recognize the Palestinian state. Those messages, largely symbolic in their minds, actually have made it harder to get peace and harder to achieve a deal with Hamas. As was mentioned before, Hamas itself has even admitted this. The pressure should not be placed on Israel, who suffered the most horrific attack against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, but on Hamas, in order to demand the immediate and unconditional release of our hostages. Yet, in a complete inversion of morality and logic, this body has urgently convened to chastise the one democracy in the Middle East, the nation standing on the front line of the battle against radical extremist terrorism. If this body truly believes in justice and morality, then let your urgency be directed where it belongs, towards dismantling Hamas, towards freeing our hostages, toward ensuring that such atrocities never happen again. Anything less is not urgency, it is hypocrisy. I thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, thank you, Assistant Secretary General Yensha and Director Rajasingham, for your briefings. Mr. President, the United States government believes that today's meeting is emblematic of the counterproductive role that far too many governments on this Council and throughout the UN system have played on this issue. Meanwhile, the United States has been working tirelessly to free the hostages, end this war, and give civilians in Gaza a future free of Hamas. To do so, we need to place responsibility where it lies, with Hamas, and hold it and other Gaza terrorist organizations fully accountable. Today's meeting, like so many other recent actions, undermines those efforts. Israel has accepted 3 ceasefire proposals. Hamas consistently rejected them. It is not negotiating in good faith. We know this because we are in the room. The simple truth is that this war could end today if Hamas let the hostages and all of Gaza go free. Remarkably, instead of pressuring Hamas, members of this body have encouraged and rewarded its intransigence, actively prolonging the war by spreading lies about Israel, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and the United States, and by handing propaganda victories to terrorists. Mr. President, the most recent round of negotiations collapsed because Hamas drew encouragement from efforts to target Israel with libels and lies, the ill-conceived and performative two-state solution conference, and unilateral announcements regarding recognition of a Palestinian state. Just days ago, a Hamas official touted the wave of recognition announcements as a result of the atrocities of October 7th. This is a disgrace. The government of Israel did not make its decision to advance its military campaign in a vacuum, but after months of Hamas's intransigence. Hamas refuses to accept a ceasefire and continues to torture the hostages. The United States supports Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas's terrorism. And ultimately, Israel has a right to decide what is necessary for its security and what measures are appropriate to end the threat posed by Hamas and other similar groups. It is unfortunate that members have again taken advantage of today's meeting to accuse Israel of genocide. These accusations are politically motivated and categorically false. They are part of a deliberate, cynical propaganda campaign as Hamas attempts to win symbolic victories to compensate for total defeat in war. The United States refutes these allegations entirely. Israel has taken numerous measures to limit harm to civilians and to address humanitarian needs. The loss of civilian life in Gaza is tragic, but the responsibility for this rests with Hamas. Mr. President, the United States remains committed to 1, addressing humanitarian needs, 2, freeing the hostages, and 3, achieving peace. Too often, members of this council spotlight only the first without acknowledging that the 3 issues are interrelated. No one wants to see innocent Gazans go hungry or thirsty. President Trump has addressed this, and he has said that the United States is going to be even more involved in these efforts. The United States has stepped up support for the secure delivery of humanitarian aid because the international community has failed to prevent Hamas from diverting it and using it to support terrorism and oppression. The United States continues to work tirelessly to feed hungry civilians in a way that denies Hamas the opportunity to benefit. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is critical to that effort as it continues to supply food directly into the hands of civilians. The GHF has distributed over 110 million meals, all while preventing Hamas looting. We call upon the UN to take advantage of the steps Israel has taken, including humanitarian pauses and designated corridors, as well as to work with the GHF, which has demonstrated it can securely deliver aid to civilians in Gaza. As Ambassador Huckabee has said, we support the GHF scaling up to 16 distribution sites to address critical needs. Mr. President, just last week, this council heard evidence that Hamas continues to starve innocent people held hostage underground and on the verge of death. We cannot allow this to happen. We must hold Hamas accountable. The United States has made clear on multiple occasions that Hamas must be removed from power. As long as it remains, there will not be peace, not for Israel and not for the Gazans who deserve to begin a new chapter free of Hamas. The United States calls upon members of the Security Council and all countries to demand that Hamas immediately release all hostages, living and dead, and lay down its weapons and end this terrible conflict. I thank you.
Thank you, President. President, China supports the initiative of the United Kingdom, Denmark, France, Greece, and Slovenia to convene this meeting. We also thank ASG Yancha and Mr. Raja Singham for their briefings. The Gaza conflict has persisted for 22 months, leading to over 61,000 civilian deaths and resulting in an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe. Despite repeated calls from the international community for a ceasefire and cessation of fighting, the situation worryingly continues to evolve in an even more dangerous direction. Given the urgency at hand, the international community, including the Security Council, must take all necessary actions before a greater disaster unfolds. I wish to share 4 points. First, we must firmly oppose any attempt to occupy Gaza. The recent approval by Israel's Security Cabinet of a plan to take over Gaza is a matter of grave concern for China. We urge Israel to stop this dangerous move at once. Gaza belongs to the Palestinian people. It is an integral part of the Palestinian territory. Any action that seeks to alter its demographic and territorial structure must be met with utmost rejection and resistance. Second, the illusion of military supremacy must be abandoned. Military means are not the way to solve this problem. An immediate ceasefire is the only right way to save lives and secure the release of hostages. Continually escalated military offensives in Gaza will only lead to more killings and deaths. We've also noted that an immediate ceasefire and the return of hostages are the very wishes of the Israeli people and the families of the hostages. The Israeli government needs to listen to the calls of both the international community and its people, immediately stop escalating tensions, and put an end to its military operations in Gaza. The country with significant influence over the parties must uphold a just and responsible stance and take concrete steps to push for a ceasefire. Third, it is imperative to alleviate the humanitarian disaster in Gaza. Gaza is on the verge of famine, with nearly 200 people having already died of starvation. Israel issued forced evacuation orders one after another, affecting over 87% of the Gazan territory and repeatedly displacing more than 1.9 million people. The lives of 2 million Gazans must not be the sacrifice of the war. The weaponization of humanitarian supplies is unacceptable. The collective punishment of the Gazan people is unacceptable. Attacking civilians and humanitarian workers as they search for supplies is equally unacceptable. Israel must fulfill its obligations under international humanitarian law as an occupying power, opening all border crossings, lifting restrictions on aid access, ensuring the large-scale, swift and safe entry of humanitarian supplies into Gaza, and supporting the UN in its aid delivery in accordance with the humanitarian principles. Fourth, it is crucial to reinvigorate the prospect of the two-state solution. Implementing the two-state solution is the only viable path to resolving the Palestinian question and achieving peaceful coexistence between Palestine and Israel. Last week's high-level conference on implementing the two-state solution witnessed strong, resounding calls in support of the two-state solution. This positive momentum should be maintained at the international level to redouble efforts to advance the political process of the two-state solution and jointly counter any unilateral move that sabotages its foundation. China stands ready to work alongside the international community to advance an end to the war in Gaza, alleviate the humanitarian catastrophe, and implement the two-state solution, ultimately achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution of the Palestinian question. I thank you, President.
Agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the delegation of China for their statement. I give the floor to the delegation of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we are disappointed that the Panamanian presidency ignored the request of the majority of members of the Security Council, including the Russian Federation, to convene an emergency meeting immediately and took the decision to only hold it today, despite the extremely dangerous developments on the occupied Palestinian territory, following the Israeli leadership's announcement of a decision to escalate hostilities in the Gaza Strip, envisaging its occupation. We thank Assistant Secretary General Miroslav Yencha and the head of the OCHA office in Geneva, Ramesh Rajasingham, for their briefings. The other day, the world found out the shocking news that the Security Cabinet of the government of Benjamin Netanyahu had taken the decision to introduce forces into Gaza and to bring the Gaza Strip under the total control of the Israeli security forces with the aim, as the Israeli cabinet said, of defeating Hamas. These actions by the Israeli leadership are a gross violation of international law. They demonstrate their blatant disregard for the appeals of the international community and the decisions of the UN Security Council, and they deal a very serious blow to the prospects for the two-state solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We roundly condemn the intentions of the Netanyahu government to seize Gaza. In this context, we join the calls upon West Jerusalem to refrain from such extremely dangerous steps which undermine the already fragile prospects for the peaceful settlement to the Middle East conflict. We insist on Israel's strict compliance with the norms of international law and the well-known legal basis for the Middle East peace process, including the relevant resolutions of the UN General Assembly and Security Council. We also recall that Israel's plans run counter to the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice of the 19th of July 2024, which inter alia unambiguously requires that West Jerusalem immediately put an end to the occupation of Palestinian lands. Moreover, the adoption of this plan essentially indicates the official and public recognition by Israel of its aims to seize and occupy the enclave. As is known, after separating from Gaza and the withdrawal of Israeli settlers from there in 2005, the Israeli leadership said that there was no state of occupation, which was not in line with the international legal interpretation given the continued Israeli control over the perimeter of the Gaza Strip, its airspace and its coastline. It turns out that over all of these years, Israel had been carrying out and is now intensifying precisely such an occupation of Gaza with all of the resulting obligations to protect and provide for the civilian population, which are binding and which should not depend on the wishes of the occupying party, as stipulated by the norms and principles of international humanitarian law, including the Fourth Geneva Convention. Mr. President, literally a few days ago, here in this Council, upon the initiative of Israel, we had a detailed discussion of the situation of the Israeli hostages in Gaza. The majority of the members of the Security Council clearly and unambiguously stated that one of the main preconditions for the release of all detained persons is an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. It is thanks to pauses in the bloodshed and active diplomacy, rather than the reckless intensification of hostilities, that over the course of 18 months it was possible to get more than 140 people out of the enclave. Unfortunately, West Jerusalem once again has not heeded the appeals of the global majority, nor sensible voices within Israel, nor the relatives and families of the hostages themselves. Instead of a negotiating process, the Israeli authorities have decided to opt for a further escalation of violence, thus jeopardizing the security and lives of the Israeli hostages, who, as we have seen, are in already unbearable conditions that are made worse by the acute shortages of food and water in Gaza. It turns out that the Foreign Minister of Israel, who was here on the 5th of August, hypocritically shed crocodile tears in this chamber over the fate of the Israeli hostages, and he already knew that the Israeli cabinet would soon take this decision, essentially ruling out the possibility of them returning home alive. By all accounts, Mr. Saar needed to lay the groundwork for it and to put out the image in the media of the solidarity and sympathy of Security Council members so as to then be able to continue killing Palestinians. Such an attempt to manipulate the Security Council for domestic Israeli interests beggars belief, just like how the Jewish people that faced the Holocaust in the Second World War can today put Palestinians in a ghetto and pursue their total destruction. How quickly the lessons of history are forgotten. It is also clear that the implementation of the Israeli leadership's plans to fully clear the enclave would even further complicate the humanitarian situation in Gaza, because essentially they have already announced further mass forced displacements and thus the suffering of the civilian population, further casualties and more bloodshed. Given the way that the conflict in Gaza is unfolding, we have no reason to believe the public statements of the Israeli authorities that they intend to provide the civilian population outside of various hostilities with everything they need. The methods that Israel is using to distribute food are well known. They are inhumane, they contradict the norms of IHL, and they are only leading to civilian deaths. This was, in particular, clearly demonstrated by the activities of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where more than 1,500 Palestinians have already died in areas where rations are being distributed. We shouldn't forget that the planned displacement of civilians during active hostilities and also the use of hunger as a weapon can be qualified as war crimes and crimes against humanity. Moreover, such actions could fall under Article 2C of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide of 1948, which Israel ratified in 1950. Mr. President, In conclusion, I would like to note that the day before yesterday, in an interview with an American television channel, Benjamin Netanyahu spoke about his intention to create an alternative administration in Gaza, which would give Gazans, I quote, a different future. This administration, according to Netanyahu, wouldn't be Palestinian. That, in turn, also contradicts numerous widely accepted international legal understandings about the Gaza Strip as an integral part of a future Palestinian state. For our part, we suggest considering some rhetorical questions. What sort of future can people have under occupation? And what do they have to say to the families of the more than 60,000 dead who no longer have any future? How many more Palestinians need to die before this inhumane slaughter ends? And how much longer can they turn a blind eye to this outrage, those who consistently and comprehensively support Israel and prevent the Security Council from acting? For our part, we consistently and unchangingly have advocated for a diplomatic solution to the Palestinian question on the basis of the two-state for two peoples formula. If implemented, Israel's legitimate security concerns would be satisfied, just as the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people to their own state would also be satisfied. The alternative to this is the death of tens of thousands more entirely innocent people, including the Israeli hostages that have been held for almost 2 years. The UN Security Council quite simply must prevent this outcome. I hope that, at long last, Washington will realize this soon. For the time being, as we understand it, despite the assurances of the State Department that they are continuing real and serious diplomatic efforts to end suffering in Gaza, to release the hostages, and to achieve a permanent peace, end quote, the United States quite simply is washing its hand and is giving West Jerusalem carte blanche to have full freedom of action in Gaza. Thank you for your attention.